We could. We don't need it anymore because AI is so good. But turns out that Adobe has created a thing that literally you put the audio together and it synchronizes it from what we're saying. So you don't need clackers anymore. It's a thing of the past.
Wow. Well, we should get some mileage out of the AI before it kills us all.
It's true. It's true. Remember those fun days when the AI just put your audio in instead of, murdering your whole family? It's 2023, if you can't tell, before the giant AI meltdown, I assume. And this is our holiday video. This is Craft of Many Kinds. I'm Emmy.
And I'm Jess.
And we are definitely just roommates. That's gal pals. That's it.
I can't wink.
That's true. I apologize. Sorry. Every time I wink, and it makes you wink, and then we're all reminded that you can't wink, and I feel bad. Anyway, this is our fourth annual holiday video.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I don't think there's very many things in my life that I've managed to do 4 years in a row. But apparently a holiday video is where it was at. So
I'm very proud of it.
Thank you. And this will be our 6th year of our upcoming anniversary will be our 6th anniversary. Which makes sense if you watched the last year, because I said it was going to be our 5th anniversary, and that's how time works.
We're here to bring you the important facts.
This is the important facts. Time, still working. However, if you did watch last year's video, you're probably like, hey, what's up with the same outfits, but a slightly less fancy background? There were some budget cuts over the year. Not to say that, you may have noticed that there were less videos on the channel this year, but that's definitely not us giving up. It was that I actually severed 2 of the ligaments in my leg this year, and I was out of work for up to this point about three months, and I've had leg surgery. You'd think this would be the most conducive time to make videos, and you're not entirely wrong. I did actually manage a few of the ones that we did this year during my downtime, but it did not leave much other time for video making when I was actually at work trying to catch up. But hopefully this upcoming year, because I will be off for 2 to 3 months, as long as we are not rained on or destroyed by, I'm assuming, the impending storm that's coming in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully there'll be more video content. And it'll be sort of leg-themed.
Leg-themed videos.
Leg-themed videos.
You heard it here first.
But today we're just doing our annual holiday video. We're checking in with you guys and doing something fun. And this year we are doing puppet shows. But before that, more on us. Jess, how are you this year? You got to go on your trip to the UK this year.
I did. I went back to the homeland, spent 3 weeks there, was able to have a big party with all my friends. Very sad that Emmy couldn't come with us because of her knee.
Yeah, it was right when I injured my leg. Yeah.
But she was definitely there in spirit. It was a great time, and very pleased to see particularly my family again after so long, and my partner Nick in Edinburgh, who came down to see me in Nottingham at the hotel where I was staying.
And not only that, he came actually for Halloween too. So we've actually had a fairly nickish year.
It's been a great year for seeing Nick again after the whole pandemic.
Yeah, when we didn't get to see him at all. Yeah, he didn't, he normally comes once a year and didn't manage the last couple of years. So it was nice seeing you, Nick. And hopefully we'll see more of you this upcoming year. Yeah, and I didn't get actually to go on the UK trip because it was just too much time off after having been off of work, which is a big bummer. I really wanted to go. I love your family. I love the UK. Maybe this upcoming year we will come up with some other kind of trip that's not like, say, international.
Yes, I think I need to limit my international travel to once every few years, just because of my chronic illness. It takes a lot of energy to travel that far.
Yeah.
But we have talked about going to Vegas, me and Paul and Emmy.
Yeah. Vegas has been one of my dream vacations, and I've never gotten to go, despite I think only living like 10 hours away. I've always wanted to go to Vegas. So you guys have been to Vegas and I've not. So we talked about doing that this year, maybe while I'm in my time off, because, it doesn't really take that much of a leg to, I guess, enjoy Vegas. So
I mean, we can't have 2 wheelchairs. Oh, I guess we could.
We could have 2 wheelchairs.
Paul could literally go around with 2 partners in wheelchairs.
Yeah, I mean, we could be the wheelchair guy. Honestly, at that point, just stick Paul in a wheelchair. You know, 3 of us, like, you know.
Shades of the future.
This year, one of my big projects is going to be, well, after the leg is healed, after that is going to be building an aviary, because I actually rescued a bird.
That's a whole long story.
It's a whole long story, which there'll be more of it later, or in a different video, I'm sure, when we actually do the aviary. But so now I have a silent cockatiel named Cutie. You will note no bird noises, despite the fact that the cockatiel is like a foot off of screen. She's a big sweetie. However, sadly, she has had some injury to her vocal cords, and so now she's completely silent and has to communicate in just being cute and, you know, other forms. So along with her and some birds that I'm planning on getting, because turns out secretly I'm a giant bird freak. I know
nobody... It wasn't that secret.
I mean, not secret to you. I feel like I've kept it inside for most other people, because owning parrots and small birds is like, you know, a 10 to 30 year commitment. But it turns out, actually, guys, I'm a huge bird freak. And of course, if being a bird freak, I would like those birds to have the most accessible and livable and lovable life. And I think part of that means not being trapped in a tiny cage. So we'll be building some kind of outdoorsy aviary / gardeny area in the upcoming months. I mean, we said we were going to get a hot tub 3 years ago, so...
yes, all of our plans take a little while to develop.
Yeah!
I mean, it has been really a few years of both of our health, you know, being not great, difficult.
Yeah.
But we get there in the end. We've done some stuff this year. We got the deck painted, and you know, some work done on the gutters which needed doing before winter.
True.
Again.
Our roof leaked a bunch last year, and also so did the garage, which that's also on the to-do list this upcoming year. It was supposed to be last year, but you know. Life happens. The best laid plans of mice and men. But yeah, hopefully this upcoming year there will be less working and more working on YouTube stuff. Yeah, so hopefully that'll work out.
And I want to have a bit of a quieter year than last year.
Yeah.
But I would really like to get in some more big dressing up.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even a drag or burlesque drag performance.
Nice. Yes, you know, you were invited. I remember that.
Mm-hmm. That was the person who runs Pretty Valentine, the band.
Oh, yes, yes.
They had a burlesque Our Flag Means Death performance that we went to in Alameda.
Sorry, my hand's just slowly slipping off. Yes, that was a fantastic night, actually.
And I mean, that's somewhere I would aspire to perform.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I would need some sort of slightly less intimidating run through first. And I have to work out how to do a drag burlesque performance from my wheelchair.
That's true. Sorry, we haven't discussed this. This is the first time we talk about it on camera. But I mean, I'm happy. I'm super happy to participate / help you, because why wouldn't you want to see us do like a wheelchair burlesque?
I really would. I would love.
We would
that.
be super good at that. Oh man. Okay. Okay. So maybe put that on the list of crafts to do this year. Because you know I'm all for accessibility. And representation and everything. So,
and I have an amazingly lovely power wheelchair that I've started using this year.
Yeah,
that's been brilliant for me. So taking that to more events now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've gotten to go out and do more things this year because of the wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And I was stuck in a wheelchair for 2 months, and it was a horrifying eye opener to just all of the accessibility issues that even places that say that they are accessible are. So, you know, between you being in a wheelchair and having a little bit of that life experience, like, I'd like to spend more time talking about wheelchair accessibility. Like, man, places really need to work on that. So
they really do.
So for sure, this is not going to be a Christmas video because we're filming this on December 23rd, despite our best efforts.
So it kind of is a Christmas video.
It's a Christmas for us. By the time you see it, maybe it'll be 2024. But hopefully not. We'll see. We'll see how fast I can edit this. But as I said earlier, today we are going to be doing a ghost puppet story for you guys, which is something I threatened to start doing actually in 2020 in the first couple of days of the pandemic. And the only reason I didn't start a YouTube puppet channel is because my order from Joann's, when they weren't allowing anybody into the store where you had to do pickup, it actually took them 3 weeks to prepare my pickup order.
Wow.
And by the time I picked, because that's the way it was at the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone, they're like, oh, you're going to be locked in your houses. Everyone buy stuff from Joann's.
Yeah. For UK viewers, Joann's is a craft store.
It's amazing. It's a beautifully amazing craft store, and they still do, but specifically for the pandemic, they started a drive up. You could order online. They would pick out your order. You'd go pick it up. And because of the pandemic and everyone had to choose that option, it took them 3 weeks to pack up my order. And by the time I got to pick up my order, the puppet craze inside of me had sort of subsided because that's who I am. So we actually, most of the stuff that made our puppets today was from that original Joann's 2020 haul. Nice. That took so long to get there. But yeah, so now I finally am doing what I've threatened to do all along, which is slowly become a puppet person. But we decided to combine two of, our passions, me, puppets, and Jess with ghost stories.
So ghost stories, particularly ghost stories at Christmas, is something that I have a great love for.
Tell me
of ghost stories.
Tell me a bit about the history of ghost stories in the UK.
It's really an ancient pastime, going back to people telling stories around the fire, around solstice and the longest night, when you would have darkness, death, and the supernatural as fitting topics.
Yeah, when it's eternally dark outside, exactly. The mind wanders.
Exactly, and also I think the death of the old year is traditionally around that point where you get to your longest day. That was a tradition way back. You can see some evidence of it in Shakespeare, with A Winter's Tale, where one of the characters says, a sad tale's best for winter, and I have one of sprites and goblins. So that's 1611.
Right, so it's been a while you guys have been doing this.
It can be traced back to that sort of date, at least. The ghost story at Christmas that most people would think of is A Christmas Carol.
Of course, yeah, the most famous.
That's 1843. That maybe kicks off the modern obsession. There was proliferation really in Victorian Britain of the sort of short story annuals, or well, I say annuals, they probably come out every month.
Right, the monthlies.
With ghost stories in the winter season by Charles Dickens and Wilkie Collins.
Right, who got paid by the word, by the way. So obviously it was definitely in his favor to make them as, wordy as possible.
A lot of Dickens is pretty wordy, although Christmas Carol actually is quite a rapid...
fairly small, isn't it?
Yes, it goes along quite quickly at a clap, which maybe is why it's also more popular than some of his others.
You actually had to read a lot of Dickens as homework for this video. His other ghost stories. Because at first I was like, we should do a different Dickens ghost story, and you read a bunch of them, and they're kind of... They would sound like they were a bit duds for what we were looking for.
I was really looking for something with at least a lot of snow on the ground.
Right? Yeah, for thematic snow. And
ghosts and a certain sort of darkness, but not necessarily as preachy as Dickens can be.
A lot of his ghost stories were more like morality tales.
There's so much morality, obviously, in Dickens, and fair enough. He was living in a time where poor people in the world he lived in were especially terribly treated.
Yeah, it was basically considered a sin to be poor, but so we did not go with that this time. We read a couple of those and we were like, oh, this is too dark. So instead, we've picked one from an author I had not heard of before.
That's right, Elizabeth Gaskell. And the story we chose is the Old Nurse's story, which came out in 1852. So not that long after Dickens started or restarted this tradition. And by 1891, I found this quote from a comedian and writer at the time, who said, whenever 5 or 6 English-speaking people meet around a fire on Christmas Eve, they start telling each other ghost stories. So it obviously by that point had become very popular, and 1890s is when you first had M.R. James telling his ghost stories.
Which I know is a favourite of yours.
Absolutely crazy about M.R. James. You're very lucky you didn't get an M.R. James
I was
story.
actually really surprised you didn't choose one of his.
Gosh, they're so dark, and actually, while they are very suitable for reading at Christmas, and British people love to watch the BBC adaptations, A Ghost Story for Christmas, which uses various of the M.R. James stories. They're not actually set necessarily at Christmas.
Okay.
They were told at Christmas.
Right, but not set at Christmas. And that was sort of what we were going for.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I reread the Old Nurse's story, that just felt bang on for me.
So Jess did the reading and writing on this assignment. I did the crafty part of this assignment. So these are some of the puppets you're going to be seeing today. We have Hester, the old nurse who is the person telling the story. She's the narrator. We have her charge, little Rosamond, and of course the one of the main ghosts of the story, the old lord. And I went insane making these, so please enjoy. We also built a small theater out of PVC pipes, which is one of my pride and joys so far. I'm really hoping it's going to end up looking as good as my mind said it would. But yeah, so here we have the little puppets. Please go ahead and enjoy our little ghost story.
The Old Nurse's Story, Elizabeth Gaskell. In 1800, Hester, a poor girl in her late teens, was recruited to act as a nursemaid for young Rosamond, a 3-year-old child with sweet and winning ways, whose parents had recently died. Hester was chosen due to being a good girl at my needle and a steady, honest girl, and one whose parents were very respectable. Little Rosamond was a grandchild to a lord, so she and Hester were shipped off to Furnival Manor House in Northumberland, which lies to the east of Cumbria, to live with Miss Grace Furnival, the child's great-great-aunt. Her aunt's manor was set in a large wild park with gnarled thorn trees and old oaks. The grand and stately house was desolate as it sat at the foot of the sweeping fells. Upon their arrival, Agnes, the housemaid and one of only a handful of servants working in the manor, led Hester and Rosamond through the halls and passageways to the drawing room. There they met old Miss Grace Furnival, Rosamond's great-great-aunt, and her lady's maid, Mrs. Stark. Miss Furnival was hard and sad, and so deaf that she used a horn to hear. Mrs. Stark was cold and drawn, but both looked pleased when Rosamond came fluttering in like a bird, playing and pranking hither and thither with a continual murmur and pretty prattle of gladness. Agnes showed Rosamond and Hester all over the house, except the east wing, which was never opened. In the grand great hall, with fireplace, chandelier and organ, they found many old portraits of the family. Agnes proudly showed them a picture of Miss Grace Furnival, who was a great beauty in her youth, but there was one obvious empty space on the wall where a portrait was missing. When Hester inquired about the missing portrait, Agnes made them promise not to tell, before she showed them a picture that had been stored away, leaning against the wall on its face. The portrait was of Miss Maud Furnival, Miss Grace's older sister, who was far more handsomer than her. As to why the portrait was against the wall, Agnes refused to say why. Winter drew in, and it got dark earlier and earlier. Sitting in the nursery one night after Rosamond had fallen asleep, Hester heard the sound of the organ in the great hall being played, booming and swelling away in the distance. When Agnes brought supper, Hester asked about the sound. Agnes turned a deathly shade of white, but told her it was just the wind in the trees. When pressed, Agnes admitted she had heard it herself many times, but most of all on winter nights and before storms, and folks did say it was the old lord playing on the great organ in the hall, just as he used to do when he was alive. Hester ran down to the great hall, half expecting to find Miss Grace playing, but when she opened the organ, she saw it was all broken and destroyed inside. One snowy Sunday afternoon towards the end of November, Hester and Agnes returned from church. They had left Rosamond behind and began to look for her when they came home. Rosamond could not be found, so Hester hunted for her in the west drawing room, at first assuming it was a game, but then becoming increasingly concerned when Miss Furnivall and Miss Stark hadn't seen her for hours. Hester came out into the front drive and there found a tiny set of footprints from the hall door vanishing around the corner of the east wing. Following, she found Rosamond under a gnarled holly tree by the path to the fells, cold as ice. Once in bed by the fire and warmed up, Rosamond explained that when watching the snow fall from the great hall windows, she saw a little girl, not as old as she was, but so pretty. And this little girl beckoned to me to come out, and oh, she was so pretty and so sweet, I could not choose but go. She took me up the fell path, up the holly trees, and there I saw a lady weeping and crying, but when she saw me, she hushed her weeping, and smiled very proud and grand, and took me on her knee, and began to lull me to sleep. Hester didn't believe her, thinking she had a fever, but when she recounted the tale to Miss Furnivall, the old lady took it completely seriously and told Hester, "That child was evil and you must keep Rosamond from her." Not long before Christmas, when Hester and Rosamond were playing in the great hall, they saw the little ghost girl, with a wound on her shoulder, seeming to sob and wail to be let in, beating against the window panes but making not a sound. Rosamond rushed to open the door, but then the organ pealed out loud and thundering, like a warning. When scooped up, Rosamond fought Hester, slapping and kicking and calling her cruel for not wanting to let the child in. After getting Rosamond to sleep, Hester threatened to quit if Agnes didn't share everything she knew of the ghost child and the lady. Agnes capitulated and began to tell her. When Miss Grace Furnivall was young, the family were extremely proud and grand. She and her elder sister Maud lived with their father, Lord Furnivall, and none were good enough to marry either beautiful sister. But, as the old saying has it, pride comes before a fall, and these two haughty beauties fell in love with the same man, an Italian musician who their father had down from London to play music with him at the manor house. He taught the old lord to play the organ, but while Lord Furnivall was thinking of nothing but his fine music, the musician was secretly walking abroad in the woods with not one, but both of the young ladies, first Miss Maud and then Miss Grace. Miss Maud won the day, and he and she were married in secret, and before he made his next yearly visit, she had given birth to a little girl at a farmhouse on the moors. But now Maud was more jealous of Grace than ever, because her husband had paid a great deal of court to the younger sister, who lorded it over Miss Maud. The hidden child was Maud's only love, as her husband finally abandoned both sisters, who grew colder and bitterer to each other every day, till at last they hardly ever spoke, and lived in almost entirely apart, having separate rooms, Grace in the west wing, and Maud in the east. One fearful night after Christmas, when the snow was lying thick and deep, and the flakes were still falling, there was a great and violent noise. Agnes could not say what happened, only that, above, they could hear the old lord's voice, cursing and swearing awfully, and the cries of a little child, and the proud defiance of a fierce woman, and the sound of a blow, and a dead stillness, and moans and wails dying away on the hillside. Then the old lord summoned all his servants and told them, with terrible oaths and words more terrible, that his daughter had disgraced herself, and that he had turned her and her child out of doors, and if they ever gave her help or food or shelter, he prayed that they might never enter heaven. And all the while Miss Grace stood by him. But the old lord never touched his organ again and died within the year. And no wonder, for on the morrow of that wild and fearful night, the shepherds, coming down the fell side, found Miss Maud sitting, all crazy and smiling, under the holly trees, nursing a child with a terrible mark on its right shoulder, dead of frost and cold. One night, just after New Year's Day, Hester and Rosamond were called to help the old ladies unpick a mistake in the tapestry. Suddenly Miss Furnivall leapt to her feet, crying that she could hear terrible screams and her father's voice. Simultaneously, Rosamond began to hear the ghost child calling again. Rosamond said, "My little girl is crying, oh how she is crying." Suddenly everyone could hear the noise and they all ran into the great hall. In the hall the screams were louder than ever. They were coming from the east wing, nearer and nearer, close on the other side of the locked up doors. All at once the east door gave way with a thundering crash, and the figure of an old man entered, dragging with him a woman carrying a little child. Rosamond immediately recognised them as the child and mother from the fells, and Hester had to hold her charge tight to prevent her from running to the terrible phantoms. Thrown towards the open doors where the wind howled for its prey, the spirit of Miss Maud tried to protect the shrinking child by her side, as her father lifted his crutch to strike. Elderly Miss Furnivall cried out, "Oh father, father, spare the little innocent child!" But just then they all saw another phantom shape grow clear out of the blue and misty light that filled the hall. It was Miss Grace in her youth, and the terrible phantoms moved on, regardless of old Miss Furnivall's wild entreaty, and the uplifted crutch fell on the right shoulder of the little child, and the younger sister looked on, stony and deadly serene. At that moment, the organ gave a final almighty peal. The lights went out, the figures vanished, and Miss Furnivall collapsed. She was carried to her bed that night, never to rise again. She lay with her face to the wall, muttering low, but muttering always, "Alas, alas, what is done in youth can never be undone in age." The end.
Ooh. Don't let your father murder your niece, because it will haunt you forever. Forever. You know what this reminds me of is that episode of Buffy where the spirits, they take over people that are nearby and they play out the tragedy over and over again.
And it has that really good song that goes on in the background.
Yeah. And so see, they were just ripping off a good original. There we go. Well, cool. Thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed the puppet show. We right now have no idea what it's going to look like because it's being done after this. So hopefully it looked great. Hopefully you'll be seeing more content from this channel this upcoming year. And we are. We're a crafter of many kinds. It's a combo effort sometimes. Thank you so much. Subscribe, and there'll be more video content upcoming in this upcoming year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, whatever time it ends up being.
My tits are glittery.
They are glittery. Where do you think the glitter on my face came from? Just roommates.